Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host.
Hi everyone, welcome to another Tutoring Tips episode of the Prepped and Polished podcast. This is Aaron of Prepped and Polished. Please be sure to check out our website at www.preppedandpolished.com. For tutoring in person and online, call us at 781-753-9951 or chat with us instantly on our website. You can also join our Prepped and Polished community on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Prepped and Polished. If you have a question after the show, please ask us a question on our chat feature on our website. We love hearing from you. Now let's get right into episode number 238, 5 similarities and differences between the SAT and ACT grammar sections. When we're looking at both the SAT and ACT tests, there is a common section known as the SAT Writing and Language section and the ACT English section. In our episode today, we're going to be talking about 5 similarities and 5 differences between both sections. When looking at both sections, there's definitely a similarity between the structure of each one. There's going to be a certain amount of passages, and during those passages, as you are reading, you'll be answering questions on a variety of topics that deal specifically with how the passage and how these sentences are structured. Furthermore, you can't simply just breeze through this section without paying attention to the content of the passage. And this is where we get into our next point, passage analysis. You will have to pay attention to simultaneously individual sentences and what they are saying, as well as the broader topic within either the paragraph itself, individually, multiple paragraphs, or the entire passage. So paying attention to what is actually being said, you have to in order to be able to answer a lot of these questions. Another similarity is actually a funny one. Both the SAT Writing and Language section and the ACT English section have an answer choice. For the ACT, it's either answer choice A or F. For the SAT, it's always usually answer choice A, where we have a no change answer. Now, we got to be very careful of this. I've heard so many students in the past say, Aaron, I've heard that if you look at no change, it's right every 4th time or every 5th time. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes it is right, and sometimes it's not right. What I like to think of, though, with the no change answer is simply this, is what is written in the text correct, or is it not? I look at no change as just simply answer choice A is what is in the text. If I were to take out what was in the text and place it instead of no change, which sometimes students do, then it's just another answer choice, and I can feel free to treat it as such. 2 other similarities between the SAT Writing and Language section, the ACT English section, are the content. It's based on content. So you have grammar topics on both sections of the test. Now, personally, I like to clump punctuation and grammar together at times, but other times they're their own things. So if we are looking at grammar, we are talking about modifying clauses, pronouns, nouns, verbs, adjectives, the like, structuring sentences with parallelism or relative pronouns. These questions show up on both sides, as do questions about commas, semicolons, colons, dashes. You really want to be prepared for either or. Similarly, rhetorical-based questions are usually the questions that are actually asked. If you look at a side-by-side comparison with the SAT Writing Language and the ACT English, you'll notice that not every question actually has a logistical question. But when you start to see a question forming, should the author add this, or should the author delete this? These kinds of questions, or the author is considering revising the sentence to say X or Y, that is when you actually have to answer based on what the question's asking. Now, any of these similarities, the structure, focusing on passage analysis, no change answers, grammar/punctuation, and rhetoric, you're going to see these similarities between both tests. So if you feel comfortable with that, it might be easier to work on either the SAT or ACT, but I would reach out to Prepped and Polish to get a second opinion. We're happy to take a look at the more specific details and differences between either of those sections that your son or daughter or student has taken, so that we can just see, is there one leaning to the other, or are they both the same? Now, in terms of the differences between both tests, now obviously there are going to be some subtle differences that we're going to be talking about, but then there's also a few that are quite significant. First of all, timing. Now, standard time for the SAT is 35 minutes for this section. Also, you have only 44 questions. On the ACT, you have 45 minutes, yay, more time, but you also have 75 questions, almost double that of the SAT. So if timing or number of questions could be a contributing factor, you want to really take a hard look at this. Another thing to keep in mind is the proportion of questions. This kind of builds off of the number of questions and timing. If you're looking at 75 questions for the ACT English section, you can expect a lot of question types are asked, and there's a good amount of quantity for each one. Usually how I look at it, it's split roughly evenly between grammar questions, punctuation questions, and rhetoric. On the SAT, however, the writing and language section, since you have fewer questions, there's not as many of each style. Usually how I like to think about it is there's about half the amount of questions for rhetoric, and the other half is some kind of combination of grammar and punctuation. Now, I can't say exactly split, 22 here, 22 there, but I do see at times a fairly even split, or one test might have a little bit more rhetoric than this one, or another test might have more grammar or punctuation. One other difference is actually the physical location of this section on the test. Now, on the ACT, the English section is the very first section. So if you are waking up early on the Saturday to take this test, and you are waking up, that is going to be with the English section. And so you want to make sure you're mentally prepared to hit the ground running for this section. However, on the SAT, it's actually the second section of the test, following the reading section. So if you are waking up during the reading, you're going to have a very small break after that, and then go diving into the writing and language. This is important because if you're practicing timing for each section, on the ACT English section, if you're just taking that separate from everything else, you're going to find that your performance on that one section could be indicative of what you would do on the test. Versus writing and language, you have to bear in mind that you're going to be taking a 65-minute section, standard time for the reading, and then taking a small break before going into the writing and language section. A fourth difference is the scale and the score. Obviously, with the ACT, each section score, including the English, is ranked out of 36. Now, this score is combined with the composite, which creates your average score for the test. The writing and language section is a scale score out of 40, but the difference between the SAT and the ACT is that the writing and language is combined with the reading to create what is known as your critical reading and writing score. So it's important to note this, is that if you are really good at English, but maybe not so good at reading, that you might prove to do better on the ACT because of that individual section and how that can affect your score, versus the SAT writing language section, which unfortunately is combined with the reading. So even if you do really well in the writing and language, if you drop in the reading, your critical reading and writing score might not represent how good you are in terms of your writing and language section. Now, the final difference is an interesting one, because there are certain unique questions to both the ACT and SAT. I'm only going to go over a few, but it's worthwhile contacting us at Prepped and Polished to get a sense of what are those differences in question types and how we can help. Now, a few question types from the ACT that we've seen before is these sentence combination questions. Now, these are different than sentence order questions or sentence placement questions. It's where you have 3 or 4 sentences in a paragraph, and they're asking you to figure out what's the correct order of them. This matters about checking on flow of the sentence and connection of ideas. Another ACT-only question is asking about the author's purpose. These questions tend to be at the end of a passage, and they ask, suppose the writer's intended or the author's intended purpose was X. Did he or she accomplish that? That's something that's really important, to take a holistic view of the passage and apply your knowledge to it. As for the SAT, we find a lot more questions are asking about effectively combining the sentences, simultaneously asking for being concise and direct, but also being thoughtful of what exactly is being mentioned and how can we present that information correctly. Another type of question that you see on the SAT are infographic questions. These questions usually are presented as tables, graphical analysis, or figure analysis that ask the student to say which of these answer choices best reflects the information presented in the table or the data that's presented. These deal with a combination of understanding what exactly is being stated, what numbers are there, and which answer choice correctly gives these values in relation to the passage. Now, all these similarities and these differences, the differences being timing, proportion of question types, location in the test, scale or score, and unique questions, knowing these similarities and differences really helps us to understand what we need to know about the test so that we can put our best foot forward. And again, I highly recommend that you reach out to us at Prepped and Polished to see what we can do for your student and how we can adjust their understanding on the test so we can best prepare them for that section. This wraps up our show, episode number 238, 5 similarities and differences between the SAT and ACT grammar sections. Be on the lookout for our next podcast, episode number 239. Thanks for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.